Hey y'all, it's Terry Battisti with the Bass Fishing Archives, and we're back this week. We're going to talk about the development of structure fishing, and primarily the man that not only coined the term, but developed the theory of structure fishing. And that man was a gentleman by the name of E.L. Buck Perry, the originator of the spoon plug, but also more importantly, the originator of structure fishing. What most people don't know is that back in the 20s, 30s, I mean, even through the 70s and 80s, most bass fishermen pounded the bank. And it wasn't until Roland Martin in the 73, 72 time frame throughout the 70s really brought structure fishing to the forefront. And how did he do that? Well, he did it by winning a ton of tournaments from 1970 on, throughout the 70s. Qualified for, pretty much every single Bassmaster Classic in that time, minus 1976. And won Angler of the Year. Goodness, I think it was 6 times in the 70s. And people wanted to emulate what Roland Martin was doing on the water. And so Roland wrote numerous articles about structure fishing and migration routes of fish and how to fish the depths away from the shoreline, how to line up, all that. But most of that was not Roland's ideas. Roland actually learned from Buck Perry in the early days in the 60s, and it was continuing to learn from him throughout the 70s. And what we have to do is credit Buck Perry with this. It's a concept that he developed from the early 30s while fishing with his dad. He noticed that some days they would go out and they would catch the fish in the shallows, but there were a lot of days that they couldn't get a fish in the shallows to bite. In fact, they didn't see any fish. And when Buck didn't see these fish, he would question his dad, "Dad, there's nothing up shallow. Why don't we look deeper?" And his dad's excuse was, "Well, they're just not biting. They're still there. They're just not biting." Well, Perry was a pretty bright individual, even as a kid. And what he started formulating in his head is that bass were not unlike deer. They weren't unlike elk, any other wild game, fox, bear, the whole 9 yards, that he felt that they had these routes that they would follow, from highlands to lowlands, based upon the season, the time of day, the temperature, bed down areas, the whole 9 yards. And unfortunately, it wouldn't be until he could get out of college that he would be able to test these theories in full. And when he was in college, though, he was writing notes to himself and developing these concepts. And when he graduated with his PhD in physics, he was able to begin fishing again. And at that point, he had already designed in his head a lure that could be fished at all depths. It turned out it was going to be eventually named the spoon plug. It was a lure that was primarily used for trolling, and he would utilize the motor to give him speed, and the different sizes of spoon plugs would determine what depth the lure would be. And that way he could cover the whole water column from really shallow down to, probably 20, 25 feet deep. And many people today probably have no clue who Buck Perry is, unless you've been around as long as me. And nor do they have an idea of what spoon plugging is. But it's like every young bass fisherman today seems to be born with the innate understanding of what structure fishing is. And I think it's important that everybody understand, where did structure fishing come from? And it came from Elwood Buck Perry out of Hickory, North Carolina. So here I was perusing through a 1974 Fishing Facts magazine, this week and ran into this ad, and that's what a spoon plug looks like. It's a flat piece of metal that's been shaped and bent up on the sides. It has a line tie at the nose, and it's got two hook hangers that come off the back. The bait is essentially pressed out of steel and then painted, and then hook hangers are put on, and voila, you've got a spoon, because it's made out of metal and shaped, but it is more like a plug, because when you cast it and retrieve it, it wiggles like a crankbait. And again, depending upon the size of the bait, it depends on how deep you're fishing. So we've got Perry. He's got this concept, and he's designed his 100 series spoon plug, and now he's going to go out and test these concepts of migration routes and et cetera, et cetera. All throughout the 50s, he's proving all of these concepts. He's going to lakes that are fished out and catching fish. He's going at bad times of the year and catching fish. And in 1965, he decides to pen a book. And prior to that, he had been writing and getting published in Fishing News, which was a newsletter that was put out by Bill Binkelman back in the day. And I think last week we touched on that briefly. Most of that early fishing news stuff was about Buck Perry's successes wherever he went. It didn't matter if it was the South or the upper Midwest. He would go to these, fished out lakes in Chicago and just waylay the bass, the walleye, the pike. It didn't matter. So in 1965, Perry decides that he's going to write a book, and that's the first book that he wrote. The title, Spoon Plugging for Freshwater Bass and All Game Fish. And the copyright in here is 1965, and it is essentially a Bible of how to spoon fish and what is required. Let me see here. Talks about water conditions. He's got some of the first renderings of how a lake will look, depending upon if it's a lowland reservoir, a highland reservoir, what do ridges look like. Here's a good illustration of a point that's coming out, the contours on it, what you should be looking for. The book is, maybe 25 pages long, but it's got so much information in it that will help any angler, catch more fish. It's not even funny. So that was his first publication. His second publication, also copyright in 1965, was the book Spoon Plugging: Your Guide to Lunker Catches. And this book is still available on Buck Perry's website. Buck has been passed for quite a few years now, and but the spoon plugging community is still alive and well. And I will leave a link in the description below to this video. But this book here is 200 and some odd pages. It's almost 300 pages long, and it goes into every aspect, not just of spoon plugging, but structure fishing. And in my eyes, this was the catalyst to the book that Fishing Facts put out called Lunkers Love Nightcrawlers. It showed exactly structure-wise what to do, what to look for, what time of year to go to certain areas of the lake, etc. It's the Bible of structure fishing. Now, in that 74 article, or in that 74 Fishing Facts magazine, another thing that I found other than the spoon plug ad was this ad for Perry's book. And now, mind you, it's 1974. Perry's book's been out for 9 years, and here's the ad that Northwoods was running for Perry's book. And the ad says, the great majority of fishermen will not be interested in this ad. But if you believe that fishing should be something more than a lifetime of frustration and a lack of success, this may interest you. And you read the text, which I will have the entire ad placed on the website at bass-archives.com, so you'll be able to read the ad itself. It just amazes me. You're in 1974. Roland Martin has brought structure fishing to the forefront. Not just Roland. I mean, Tom Mann was doing this. Blake Honeycutt, who was a disciple of Buck Perry, actually helped him build baits when he was a kid. Blake was an advocate. So you had Roland Martin, Blake Honeycutt, Tom Mann, Gerald Blanchard. I mean, everybody was leaving the bank and going out and fishing structure. And that's the other thing that the book first talks about, is how do you find a hump out in the middle of nowhere using a topo map, but how do you get to the sweet spot time and time again? And the book talks about triangulation, using marks on the or trees or buildings or something like that on the shoreline to triangulate so you'll get back up onto that spot again. The book talks about that in depth. It's a great book. I mean, the book, if you buy it from the website, Buck Perry website, is I think $24.95 or something like that. You can find them all day on eBay used or Abe Books used for anywhere from $8 or $9, to some people think they're worth $100, but that's just crazy. Anyway. So Perry also has a short history of Buck Perry's spoon plugging, and this is a good read for the historians out there, because it actually goes in depth on how he came up with these concepts as a kid and how it took him through college to actually get out and be able to develop the concepts and prove the concepts. This book, unfortunately, is out of print. You will have to buy that on eBay or Abe Books, and the title of it is A Short History of Buck Perry's Spoon Plugging. It is a great little booklet. It's only 15 pages long, but for you history nuts out there, I highly suggest it. Recently I was spending some time with Rodney Honeycutt, who was Blake Honeycutt's son. Blake, again, holds the record for a 3-day, 15 fish per day limit Bassmaster tournament, total weight record of 138 pounds, 6 ounces. That was caught at Lake Eufaula in 1969. And talking to Rodney and his dad went down there to fish the 68 tournament. And at that point, Blake and Rodney, I mean, they were devotees of spoon plugging. And what do? They go down to Eufaula with buckets and bags and tackle boxes full of spoon plugs. And within the first 2 days of pre-practicing for the tournament, they lose all their spoon plugs trolling. There was just nothing. Eufaula at the time, I guess, had a bunch of wood in it, and it was not a good sight. So Rodney gets paired with John Powell the next day, and Powell ends up winning the tournament, and Rodney catches the big fish of the tournament, and they get on worm fishing. But I was talking to Rodney about Buck, and how did Buck do it? Did he just troll? And Rodney's, because it was always my assumption that is all that Perry did was troll. And Rodney's like, oh no, Buck didn't just troll. He would troll, and if we were fishing a long point or trolling a long point, if he got bit 2 times off that point off of a specific line, he would then stop the boat, he would go anchor up on that point in order to be able to cast to that spot that they were catching. Now, where Buck didn't deviate is that he would actually cast and retrieve the spoon plug, whereas it was Blake Honeycutt and Rodney and others that started fishing the Hopkins spoon, jelly worms, jigs and eels back in the day, whereas Buck would just throw the spoon plug. So I found that kind of interesting, because it was always my assumption that Buck would only troll to catch his fish, not troll to find some fish, and then when he found a concentration, he'd actually stop, anchor, and fish them from a standing position. So anyway, I just wanted to enlighten everybody, and for you folks out there that know Buck Perry, maybe jog your memories a little bit about who really invented structure fishing. Yeah, we've talked about Jason Lucas in the past, and yeah, he was one of the first people that started telling people to go offshore. That was in the mid to late 1940s, but nobody put together the concept, developed the concept, and communicated it like Elwood Buck Perry did. So that's all for today's post, folks. Hope you liked it, and if you liked it, please leave a comment below in the comment section. Love how everybody's starting to contribute down in the comments. And if you have any suggestions for things that you would like to see in the future, please put those down in the comments also. And if you like the channel, please subscribe. We're trying to build this up so we could be bringing you, again, weekly stuff. And it just, when you got support, it builds the momentum. So I appreciate y'all, and hope you guys have a great weekend. Take care.